From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. It's hard not to admire Ashley Ljesevic, the founder and host of the Endurance Diaries podcast. Ashley tabs herself a story-driven marketing consultant. But on her theme of endurance, Ashley talks often about what it takes to live a life of purpose with no quit. Discovering and sharing stories of endurance and resilience, like what Ashley has accomplished, is a niche of the Business Observer. To read more, subscribe. Go to businessobserverfl.com to sign up. Hello, and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Ashley Ljesevic, podcast host and founder of Endurance Diaries Media in Sarasota. Ashley, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's good to chat with you. I want to hear more about Endurance Diaries Media and your podcasting. I've listened to some of your amazing episodes. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about your career and some recent changes in your career. Before we even dive into that, let's get our audience to know you a little bit better, Ashley, with these deep, really not that deep, but kind of deep, rapid fire questions. We're going to start with, if you had to delete all but 3 apps on your phone, what would the 3 apps, what 3 apps would you keep?
I want to say it's a hard question, but it feels like they're just coming to me right now because I know what's important to me. And I would say I would keep WhatsApp because iMessage is already ingrained, so I'm assuming that's safe, right? So I would keep WhatsApp, a messaging app. I would keep Spotify for my music and my podcasts, listening. I love listening to podcasts, and the Bible app.
Excellent. Those are 3 good ones. And do you have a favorite, top of your head, like either favorite or most recent listened to podcast besides From the Corner Office? But outside of that, what would be a go-to podcast you have?
I really like Brene Brown's podcast, and she just started back up again. I've been listening to her series with Adam Grant, and I just appreciate her thought leadership. So I would go with Brene Brown. But I'm a big fan of all podcasts and a consumer, and just love listening and love learning.
Brene Brown is great. Dare to Lead is a really excellent leadership book. And she actually, I'm sure it's still there. This is a couple of years ago when I started From the Corner Office. She has a button, a page on her website to invite her onto your podcast. So I did get a response. But Brene, if you're listening, please come on From the Corner Office. I'd love to talk to you someday.
I love that. I'm cheering for that too, Mark. Brene, gotta do it.
We'll co-partner on that, Ashley, for sure. If you had a time machine, would you go back in time would you go backward or forward, and why?
I would go forward into the future. It's a loaded question as to why, but it's also very obvious. To me, it's very obvious. I think we got to live forward. We got to keep moving forward. We got to keep going. That's a big motto of my podcast, Endurance Diaries. And I think we learn from the past, but we got to keep moving forward. Yeah,
for sure. All right, that's last one. What's the best meal you cook or prepare?
The best meal I cook or prepare are the leftovers from Vlad's cooking, because I got to give my husband a plug here. He is an amazing cook.
Is he? Go Vlad, go.
Yes. So
awesome.
That's it. That's my answer.
All right, prepare leftovers. That's good. I love leftovers. All right, Ashley, tell us, I saw on LinkedIn some of my really interesting posts you put on very recently. We're recording here in mid-November, sort of a week before Thanksgiving, and you had a post recently on LinkedIn, on social media, maybe other sites as well, but I saw it on LinkedIn, 10 by 10 about these 10 different things that you've done in your career. And, I know it's hard to willow it down to an elevator pitch, but what is that? Like, that's really interesting to me. So tell us what 10 by 10 is.
So, I posed this question And I said, would you believe me if I told you that I've had 10 different employers in the last 10 years? Because that's quite, I think it's kind of hard to believe, but it's true. And I have. And it speaks to, a very non-linear career path that I've been on over these last 10 years, from when I graduated college and working in, endurance sports. And then when my husband and I moved to Florida, and just those transitions and trying to find work here, and what does that look like, and the market is different. And so I shared this post because I'm in yet another transition, and I really just wanted to reflect on the journey. And I think not just for myself, but also for others who find themselves, maybe stuck, or maybe in that middle, or looking for what's next and what's ahead, and really just taking time to see yourself in the process. And I think that's very important, because over the last 10 years, there's so much that I've learned. There's so many different work environments I've been part of, different leaders that I've, had the honor and privilege of working with, and learning from. And so all of that, I believe, connects to what's next, what's ahead. And I think it's something to not be discouraged by, because here's the thing I believe about our stories is that, there's so much more to each and every one of us. And oftentimes with resumes, we see what's on paper. And I'm a big advocate for, you're so much more than what it is that you can see on a piece of paper. And so when we tell our stories, we bring that to life. It allows, somebody else to really understand more about who you are. And so that's what I wanted to do, and what I shared. Because there's so much in the journey, and there's so much to each and every one of us.
Yeah.
And I think reflection is very important.
Yeah, it's funny to end your answer with reflection, because it made me reflect. And I don't think it's similar in one way, but not in a lot of other ways. But I've been at the Observer Media Group for 20 years this fall. But I got here when I was 31. And so in the time between when I graduated college, 22 and 31, I had 8 jobs and lived in 4 cities. So, and some of that was just kind of the way the industry is, the news industry is. It's not as much now as it was, but it's very much work your way up, find your bigger publication. And then to your point earlier that you made, you find your place, your people, something that, shares your values, your vision for what organization you want to work for. So, all right, so going back to you, because that's what we're talking about, is you lead up to Endurance Diaries Media. Tell us about Endurance Diaries Media and what that is.
Yeah, so I started a podcast 4 years ago called Endurance Diaries Podcast. And that really came out of a place for me where I was in a transition again for work, and reflecting on my journey. I was a former athlete and always struggled with performance pressure. And so in the middle of, my journey, the things that I'm learning, things that happened that were out of my control, and coming back to myself and doing the introspection and just, self-discovery, et cetera, I wanted to, I guess I posed a challenge to myself. Can I enter a process where there's no outcome goals attached? And that's very hard for somebody who's has a performance mindset as an athlete, where all you know is goals and you have to hit that goal. But what would it look like to enter a process where you take that off the table and you just show up to the space? What can happen then? And so I started this podcast during a time of transition back in 2021, and really just a space I wanted to create to share, stories, and to share people's journeys, and to, provide a platform for others to let their voices be heard and their stories, to be shared, because I know the power in that in my own life, and people who have sat on the other side of the table with me and listened to my perspective, listened to the things that I'm going through. And I believe that's the most important thing is our relationships and people, and what it is that we can learn from one another. So I entered this process, and I've had the privilege of interviewing, professional athletes, to CEOs, to entrepreneurs, to artists, to all across the table. And I've learned so much in that. And I really just want to create this open space. So anyways, how that connects to Endurance Diaries Media is that over these several years, and throughout all my career transitions, the podcast has always been my space that I can go to without pressure, without that you have to do this thing, or no, it's when I show up to it, I show up to it. And I love that I can do that and I have that. And so I've realized in myself over the last 10 years, how can I combine my professional experience, within marketing, within sales, partnerships, with what it is I truly enjoy, working one-on-one with people, showing up with others, the power of our stories, basically combining everything together and allowing myself the space to explore that further, to go in on that, to bet on myself, if you will. I know it's a kind of buzzword thing to say, bet on yourself. But can I do that? And can I trust myself in the process? And can I also, see where that can go? And so that's the space that I'm in. And I am, the podcast is still it's still my hobby. I say to people, like, don't we all have hobbies anymore? Don't we just do things for fun? Everybody assumes you're doing something for an alternative motive, or like there has to be money attached to it, has to be this. I love the podcast space for what it is. And I also love to, I have value in the professional sense, right? In work, in marketing and all of that. And so I guess that's a long way of saying, can I combine everything together and branch off and work one-on-one with people, for their own, marketing needs in that way? And how you can really amplify your story and make it part of your marketing strategy too. So they're separate, but connected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so tell us about some of the guests or just people that you've encountered with the podcast that really stand out to you, some leadership lessons. You talked about people you could learn from, athletes, executives, nonprofit leaders. Who are one or two people that stand out, and what did you learn?
Oh my gosh. That is such I'm like, what is this podcast? 30 minutes long. There's so much that, that I've learned, by hosting all of these different people. I mean, I'm just thinking about, I recently recorded with, he's a former MLB catcher. You may know him, Mark, being in with Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh connection. But Michael the Fort McHenry, who was a catcher for the Pirates, and that episode will come out in early December. But something about him is I knew him as a baseball player. When I was in 2013, when the Pirates had that crazy run and went into the playoffs and everything, he was part of that team. And so throughout my conversation with him, I had no idea some of the things that he experienced, throughout his life, and the surgeries that he had to overcome. And, he had mono really bad, and he had all of these things, other family things going on. And you just realize that what we see on the surface is not just the full story, right? And so not just in him or these athletes that, or other people and, different motivational speakers I've had the honor of interviewing as well too. But there's so much more to that person than just what it is that you see. And I believe that that's the through line with all of the guests that I've hosted. And there's the quote I love. He's an Austrian philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And I would say that's it captures so much of this space with Endurance Diaries, because there's people from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different crafts, different interests, etc. And I'm here listening to their stories and learning so much from them. And I think it expands my own worldview in those ways too. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing, right? Is like, there is something that you can learn from everybody. And that's the space I want to create.
And tell us that quote again. I like that. So you're limited.
The limits of my language are the limits of my world.
Yeah.
And that's just like come on.
It's like a driver. I can see it's like a North Star for you, right?
Totally.
It's like where you go. I like that. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So what is, one of the questions we ask a lot is, what does leadership mean? I want your answer on that. Obviously, it's a leadership podcast, but what does start with endurance? Ashley, what does endurance mean to you?
Endurance. is that thing that lives within us that keeps us going. And to me, is that it's something that we build through our life experiences. I got into long distance running after I stopped playing basketball because I needed that thing to keep me going. And endurance is something where when you get to that point that you want to stop, everything inside you is telling you to stop. And you also have that thing inside you that can push you to keep going. And we build that by stretching ourselves. We build that by, getting to those moments in life where we just take that next step. That's how we build endurance to keep going. So whenever obstacles come and challenges come and hard times come, because they do and they will continue. And also, you have that strength within you to keep going. And it's through all of those moments in our lives, all of those times that we struggle and that we want to just, give up, that we have that within us that actually keeps us going, and we can find that. And so that's endurance, I think, to me.
What's an example of a race, a game, a contest, something you did where, man, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to finish, I'm not going to be able to do this, but you did, and you overcame something, you personally?
It was when I was training for my first full marathon that I never actually completed because it got canceled by COVID.
Oh man.
But that's terrible. I know, right? But hey, it happens. It's life. But when I was training for that, I got up to, I think it was like 17 miles was my longest run that I have done. And it's all relative, right? For some people, that's nothing. If you're an ultra marathoner, that's another, walk in the park. For me, it was the furthest I've ever run. And I remember doing that. I was running around Sarasota, and then I did 3 or 4 miles like on Lido Beach, which was really hard running in the sand. And I got to a point in that where I was at the marathon or the half marathon distance, which is 13.1. And at that point I was like, all right, like I've just ran a half marathon and now I'm supposed to go another 5 more miles. And I remember in that telling myself, and this is something that's carried with me, so there's a point to all of this, is just counting the next 10 steps. And by doing that, you're just counting the next 10 steps. Okay, I'm just doing 10 steps. And then I'm just doing it again. And I got out of that mental limitation that I had of, oh, you're just going to stop here. Because when I'm refocusing, just focus on those next 10 steps in front of me. I can do that. Okay, then that's going to add up. That's going to add up. That's going to add up. And I think that is a lesson that translates into everyday life, is that when you want to stop or you think, oh, this is too much, I don't know if I can do this. Okay, what is just that next step that's right? What is the next step you have to take? Just do that next step. Just do the next step. Don't get so far ahead. Then you realize, okay, look how far I've come.
Yeah, that's just great advice for anything, whether you're in a business or organization or obviously sports or personal goals. So, talk about, you've probably played under a lot of different coaches, some you really love and some probably not as much. When you talk about leadership, Ashley, what's one characteristic you think every good leader, every good coach needs to have?
Empathy. I think empathy is so important because it's the understanding of one another. And I think when we can come and understand one another and we can ask questions and we see each other, then it builds trust, and that's a safety. And then people can show up and freely perform, and they want to perform, and they want to hit their goal and exceed their goal because they feel supported in that. And how do we feel supported is by when somebody else, sees us and bringing that humanity back into it, right? Because we all have the things that are happening in the background. And so I think when leaders have empathy and they really care about the people that are in the room, I think it makes all the difference. And it increases performance, right? At the end of the day, if you're like, hey, we got to hit these goals, we got to exceed the numbers, hit the numbers, because,
Got to hit those numbers.
Got to hit those numbers. But yeah. What if we, see people and I think, that just makes all the difference. So,
well, that goes to a lot of surveys where you talk about empathy connected to corporate culture, right? And people leaving organizations, not because they didn't make another $5,000, not that money's not important, it's important, obviously, but that people leave organizations because of something with a boss or something with the culture or something with the vision that, those are the reasons you have to retain people.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, going back to that 10 by 10 you were talking about with the post that I shared about my career and having 10 different employers, I've seen a lot. I've been part of a lot of different work environments, both virtually, in person, in the office. And I'm a very observant person. And I can see where a lot of it's a breakdown in communication because we don't understand one another. Everyone wants to think their way is right. And if we just get into a room and ask the questions and really understand why somebody's coming to this conclusion, then okay, how can we bridge those gaps and actually work together and keep moving forward? But I think it's breakdown in communication because we don't understand one another.
Yeah, I want to talk about one other leadership question. It's come up on your podcast on a few of the episodes I've listened to, and I bet in your career as well. Some version of imposter syndrome. How, Ashley, do you deal with when you don't think you have what it takes, right? Or your self-doubt, you're doubting yourself that yes, you can. How do you, as a human, but as a leader, how have you dealt with those situations?
Imposter syndrome. Yeah, I think everybody has it in some ways, right? And I believe that's where the power of one another comes in to remind us of who it is that we are. And I think something that's been it's kind of one of those like sayings, I guess, that comes into my head is that, oftentimes you go into a room and you think you have to earn your belonging when you're there, but the invitation into that room is your belonging. And so I don't have to go there and try to prove myself. The invitation is the belonging. So when I'm there, I have a purpose in that room. And I remind myself of that whenever I can feel a little intimidated or like, I shouldn't be here. Why am I in this room with all these other people? And there's also something that I've learned over time too, and I think the podcast has helped with this as well, is that I've interviewed people with this social status or with this title or with this, and we get this like, oh, we think that somebody that is so high ranked here that all of a sudden they're like, let's put them on a pedestal. We can just have a conversation and connect on a human level, and let's break down all of those barriers and all of those things that, like, we're all just people here in this room, right? And I have something valuable to bring, and so do you.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm going to shout out to my awesome producer, Reed Corley, and I have been doing this a couple of years, and we've had 2 guests on From the Corner Office who came with these like crazy statistics on their podcast, millions and millions, and top 1% of Apple and top 0.5%. And they both were very good guests, and we got very good insights from them. But I was imposter syndrome and a little, I remember saying to Reed, I'm kind of intimidated by one of these people. But it was just a conversation where I asked a different stream of questions, but with a similar intention. And it's just a conversation, to your point.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's the really unique thing, right? Is that everybody has something, valuable to bring. People ask me like, well, what's the niche of your podcast? Or like, they have this assumption that, I don't know. Yeah. I'm just like, it's everybody. Like, go look at my guests. You'll see somebody that you may recognize, in the sports world. And then you may see somebody that you're like, who is this person? Who, like, come on. We all have something that we can give and that we can share and that we can learn from one another. And so that's where I stand with that. I don't get fazed by, I'm all of these things. Like, I mean, what are the labels are limitations. And so I don't want to put myself into a box. The podcast is definitely not in a box. Yeah. And let's break down the boxes that we put one another into. Yeah.
Excellent. Ashley, as we wind down in the year here in 2025, what can we look forward to from you and Endurance Diaries media going into 2026? What's top of mind for you?
Well, I am excited about, I have a very renewed energy in myself because I feel like I'm coming into this alignment where every parts along my journey and everything are bringing me to a point where I'm like, yes, I'm gonna go in on this. I'm kind of in this like, pre-launch mode in a way, not to like get myself way too hype about. But I'm excited about this because I love this. I love working with people, and I love creating a space for collaboration, for bringing, stories to life, and also marketing strategy that can help grow your business in a way. And so again, separating the podcast is coming up on 100 episodes. I'm excited about that. And also I'm excited about this other space I'm entering in where I can partner, one-on-one with people as a marketing support and as somebody that can help you in your next stage of growth. And so as we're going into this season, I'm honoring my capacity. And I shared this when I wrote the post. To me, what's most important is one-on-one time with people and spending time, with people that I love and that I care about. And that will always be it. And so I got to check myself. If I'm doing all these things that's not at the core, then I gotta shift something around. And I've shared that, in the post. And so to me, it's looking at myself, honoring that capacity first and foremost, and then getting into this creative stuff and work and growth. So I'm just excited about it.
A lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Ashley Ljesevic, thank you so much for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much. This has been awesome and love what you're doing in this space. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.